My parents convinced my boyfriend of 3 years to marry my own sister. They sat across from me in a private room at one of the nicest restaurants in Washington, D.C., and calmly explained that she was simply a better investment. She deserves him more than you do, my mother said. She has a stable career, a predictable future. My father nodded and added the sentence that shattered something inside me. No serious man wants to build a family around a woman who disappears into military deployments every year. 3 years later, those same people walked into a black-tie charity gala and saw my husband standing beside me. The color drained from their faces, because the man holding my hand wasn't just another successful businessman. He was the one person capable of deciding whether my ex-boyfriend's company survived the next 12 months. And when my husband stepped onto the stage and introduced me as his wife, my family finally understood the cost of throwing me away. My name is Sarah Carter, and this is the story of how the worst night of my life became the best thing that ever happened to me. The chandelier above our table scattered golden light across the polished crystal glasses. Everything about the room felt expensive. The dark walnut walls, the white linen tablecloth, the soft sound of a pianist playing somewhere beyond the private dining area. I stood outside the room for a moment, smiling to myself. 3 years. Ryan and I had been together for 3 years. I was 31 years old, a captain in the United States Army, and despite the distance, the deployments, and the long stretches apart, I genuinely believed we had built something strong. I had spent the previous month searching for the perfect gift. Inside the small navy blue box in my purse was a custom watch engraved with a simple message. For our next chapter. I thought tonight might be the night he proposed. The hostess opened the door. Right this way, ma'am. I stepped inside. Then my entire world stopped moving. Ryan was standing at the center of the room. My older sister Emily stood in front of him, and Ryan was sliding a diamond ring onto her finger. For several seconds, my brain refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. Emily looked down at the ring and laughed softly. My mother raised a champagne glass. My father smiled. Nobody looked surprised to see me. Nobody looked guilty. Nobody even stood up. The room was silent except for the pounding of blood in my ears. Ryan finally turned. The moment he saw me, all the color drained from his face. Sarah, the word barely escaped his mouth. I looked around the table. My mother, my father, my sister, my boyfriend. Every single one of them already knew this was happening. Every single one of them had chosen it. What is this? My voice sounded strangely calm. That frightened me more than if I had been screaming. My mother set her champagne flute down. Please don't make a scene. The sentence hit harder than a slap. Not, I'm sorry. Not, this isn't what it looks like. Not, we can explain. Just, please don't embarrass us. I looked at Ryan. Tell me I'm misunderstanding this. His eyes dropped to the floor. That was answer enough. Emily slowly extended her left hand, admiring the diamond. It's beautiful, isn't it? I stared at her. She smiled. The same smile she had worn her entire life whenever she won something that was supposed to belong to me. The better birthday gifts. The better car. The better college support. The better opportunities. Now apparently the better boyfriend. You're serious? Emily shrugged. It happened naturally. No, I said quietly. This didn't happen naturally. My father leaned back in his chair. His expression carried that familiar look of superiority I had known since childhood. Sit down, Sarah. I remained standing. He sighed heavily. Fine, then listen. Something inside me went cold. Because suddenly I realized this wasn't a betrayal. It was an intervention. A planned event. A meeting. A decision. They had discussed this. Organized it. Approved it. My mother folded her hands. Ryan is entering a different stage of life. I laughed once. A short, disbelieving sound. A different stage. Yes. She nodded. He's building something significant. I looked at Ryan. Still silent. Still staring at the floor. Still letting them speak for him. My mother continued. Emily compliments that future. I felt my jaw tighten. Compliments. She's a physician. My father picked up the conversation. She has stability. Emily smiled again. She's respected. My mother nodded. She'll be available. Then she looked directly at me. And she won't disappear overseas for months at a time. There it was. The real reason. Not because Ryan loved Emily. Not because Emily loved Ryan. Not because they belonged together. Because I was a soldier. Because my career made them uncomfortable. Because my service didn't fit the image they wanted. I looked at my father, the man who used to tell everyone how proud he was when I first put on the uniform. Now he wouldn't even look me in the eye. You encouraged this. His silence answered immediately. My mother answered instead. We helped Ryan understand what kind of future would make the most sense. The room blurred for a second. I gripped the back of a chair. Ryan finally spoke. Sarah, don't. The word came out sharper than intended. He stopped. You don't get to say my name right now. His face crumpled slightly. Good. For the first time all evening, someone looked uncomfortable. Tell me something. I turned toward him. Did you ever plan on telling me? His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing. The answer was obvious. Number. He had planned to let me discover it exactly like this. My sister laughed softly. Honestly, Sarah, you're acting surprised. I stared at her. She crossed her legs. Ryan has goals. The arrogance in her voice was breathtaking. He wants partnerships, political connections, a strong public image. I felt my stomach twist. And I'm what? She tilted her head. You're a soldier. The way she said it made it sound like a flaw, not a profession, not a sacrifice, not a calling, a flaw. Ryan finally found enough courage to speak. It isn't about that. Then what is it about? He swallowed. The timing. I laughed again, this time harder. The timing. We want different things. I nodded slowly. You mean your future law partners want a wife who attends charity dinners instead of military briefings? Nobody answered, which was answer enough. I reached into my purse, pulled out the blue gift box, and placed it on the table. Ryan stared at it. What's that? The anniversary gift I bought before walking in here. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I slid it across the table. The box stopped directly in front of him. For our next chapter, I said. His eyes widened, because he knew exactly what was engraved inside. I had told him months ago. For the first time that night, genuine shame appeared on his face. Not enough, but something. I looked around the room one last time, at the people who were supposed to love me, at the people who had decided I was less valuable than my sister, less predictable, less convenient, less worthy. Then I smiled, a small smile. Not because I was happy, because I suddenly understood something. The daughter they were rejecting no longer needed their approval. Congratulations. Emily blinked. What? Congratulations. I picked up my purse, straightened my shoulders, and headed for the door. Sarah, my mother called. I stopped. Without turning around? You're making a mistake, she said. I finally looked back. Number. My voice was calm, steady, controlled. The mistake was believing any of you were on my side. Then I walked out. The humid Washington night wrapped around me the moment I reached the parking lot. I sat inside my car for almost 10 minutes, not crying, not screaming, just staring through the windshield. Eventually, I pulled out my phone. One by one. Ryan, blocked. Emily, blocked. Mom, blocked. Dad, blocked. The screen went dark. The silence felt strange, almost peaceful. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and made myself a promise. I would never beg them to see my value again. If they wanted to build their future without me, they were free to do it. I would build mine without them, and one day they would see exactly what they had thrown away. The army did not care that my heart was broken. That turned out to be exactly what I needed. Fort Liberty was cold the morning I reported back from leave. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and diesel fuel. Soldiers moved across the base with the same relentless purpose they always had. Trucks rolled past, helicopters thundered overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a drill sergeant was yelling at a group of exhausted recruits. Nobody asked how I was feeling. Nobody cared that my boyfriend had proposed to my sister. Nobody cared that my parents had helped arrange it. The mission schedule remained unchanged. My responsibilities remained unchanged. The world kept moving. And eventually so did I. The first 6 months were brutal. Not because of Ryan. Not because of Emily. Because silence leaves room for memories. Every time I sat alone in my quarters, my mind wandered back to that restaurant. The ring, the champagne glasses, my mother's expression, my father's disappointment, Ryan's cowardice. The memories arrived uninvited and lingered longer than they should have. But something interesting happened. Pain has a limited lifespan when you stop feeding it. I stopped checking social media. I stopped asking mutual friends for updates. I stopped wondering whether Ryan regretted his choice. I simply worked. And work became my salvation. 6 months later, I was deployed overseas. Then another deployment followed. Then another. The years blurred together into a sequence of early mornings, briefing rooms, aircraft noise, and responsibility. While most people measured time through holidays and birthdays, military officers measured time through assignments, training exercises, operations, leadership evaluations, promotions. The further I moved from Washington, the less power my family's opinions held over me. I stopped seeing myself through their eyes. For the first time in my life, I began seeing myself through my own. That realization changed everything. I discovered I was actually very good at command. Not good. Exceptional. I stayed calm under pressure. I made decisions quickly. People trusted me. Most importantly, soldiers followed me because they respected me, not because they had to. Respect earned through competence lasts longer than respect demanded through authority. I learned that lesson from some of the best leaders in the army. One afternoon in Germany, a brigadier general called me into his office after a large multinational training exercise. I expected criticism. Instead, he handed me a cup of coffee and spent 40 minutes discussing my future. "You think strategically." I still remember those words. "You don't just solve problems, you anticipate them." Coming from him, it meant something. The general wasn't known for compliments. He was known for results. When he recommended me for a prestigious leadership program, doors started opening. One promotion led to another. Assignments became more competitive. Responsibilities grew larger. The years that followed were the busiest of my life, and the most fulfilling. I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who had already made up their minds. Instead, I focused on proving it to myself. 3 years after leaving that restaurant, the woman staring back from my mirror barely resembled the woman who had walked out of it. I stood taller, spoke more confidently, carried myself differently. The insecurity was gone. Not completely. Scars never disappear entirely. But they no longer controlled me. Then Daniel Brooks entered my life. The funny thing is, I almost missed him completely. We met during a defense innovation conference in Virginia. The Army had assigned me to participate in a panel discussing military logistics modernization. It sounded significantly more exciting on paper than it actually was. The ballroom was filled with military officers, defense contractors, consultants, lobbyists, and enough politicians to make me want another cup of coffee. I spent most of the afternoon answering questions and pretending not to be bored. After the final panel ended, I escaped toward a quieter section of the venue. That was where I first noticed him. He wasn't surrounded by people. He wasn't making speeches. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was standing alone near a window overlooking the Potomac River. Just drinking coffee, looking thoughtful. I probably wouldn't have approached him if he hadn't smiled first. "Colonel Carter." I laughed. Not yet, he agreed. Something about him felt different. Most powerful people announce their status within 5 minutes. Daniel never mentioned his. Instead, he asked about my work, my soldiers, my experiences overseas. For nearly an hour we talked. Not once did he interrupt. Not once did he try turning the conversation back toward himself. It was strangely refreshing. When the conference ended, I assumed that would be the last time we spoke. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, flowers arrived at my office. Not roses. No dramatic romantic gesture. Just a simple arrangement accompanied by a handwritten note. "Dinner. Daniel." I stared at the note for several minutes, then laughed, then ignored it. A month later, he tried again, this time with coffee, then lunch, then another invitation. Daniel possessed a quality I hadn't encountered before. Persistence without arrogance. He never pressured, never manipulated, never demanded. He simply kept showing up. Eventually, curiosity won. I agreed to dinner. 1 dinner became 3. 3 became 10. Before long, he had quietly inserted himself into my life. The strangest part was how normal everything felt. Ryan had constantly worried about appearances, status, connections, optics. Daniel never seemed interested in any of those things. He cared whether I was happy, whether I was exhausted, whether I was sleeping enough, whether I had eaten. Simple things, healthy things, things I hadn't realized I was missing. About 6 months into our relationship, I finally learned the truth. I was sitting across from him at a restaurant when a news segment appeared on a television mounted above the bar. The anchor was discussing a major acquisition involving one of the largest defense technology companies in America. The camera switched to a photograph. Daniel's photograph. I nearly dropped my glass. He winced immediately. "You were eventually going to find out. You're the CEO." He nodded. "Not just any CEO. The CEO. One of the most influential figures in the entire defense industry. A man whose company worked directly with the Pentagon. A man worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A man powerful enough to command entire boardrooms with a single phone call. And somehow he had never bothered mentioning any of it. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel smiled. Because I wanted you to like me first. I stared at him, then started laughing. The laugh lasted nearly a minute, and for the first time in years it felt effortless. Real. Free. Over the next 2 years our relationship deepened. He never asked me to leave the army. Never suggested I change careers. Never implied my ambitions threatened him. In fact, he encouraged them. Every promotion, every achievement, every success. He celebrated all of it. The exact opposite of everything I had experienced before. 8 months before the gala that would change everything Daniel proposed. Not in front of cameras. Not during a public event. Not at an expensive restaurant. He proposed during a quiet weekend at a lake house in Montana. Just the two of us. No audience. No performance. No spectacle. Only sincerity. I said yes. 3 months later, we married in a private ceremony attended by a handful of trusted friends. No press. No announcements. No family. Especially not mine. As far as my parents knew, I had vanished from their lives 3 years earlier, and I intended to keep it that way. At least until fate placed them directly back into mine. Success has a strange way of finding the people who once ignored you. Not because it changes who you are, because it reveals who everyone else really was. 3 years had passed since I blocked my family. 3 years since I watched Ryan place a ring on Emily's finger. 3 years since my parents decided my future was less valuable than my sister's. In all that time, not one of them reached out. No apology. No explanation. No birthday card. No holiday message. Nothing. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Some relationships don't end with an argument. They end with clarity. By then, my life had become almost unrecognizable. I had recently been promoted to lieutenant colonel. The ceremony had been surprisingly emotional. Not because of the rank itself, because I remembered standing in that restaurant years earlier listening to my father explain why no serious man would ever build a future around me. Now senior officers were trusting me with responsibilities that affected hundreds of soldiers. Life has a sense of humor sometimes. My marriage was thriving. Daniel and I had settled into a rhythm that felt effortless. Neither of us needed constant attention. Neither of us demanded the other become smaller. We simply respected each other. That respect became the foundation for everything else. One evening I was sitting in my office reviewing operational reports when my personal assistant knocked lightly on the door. "Do you have a minute?" I looked up. "Sure." She stepped inside carrying a large leather binder. I immediately recognized it. The gala binder. For nearly a year I had been working with veterans organizations, military foundations, and several corporate sponsors to create one of the largest fundraising events for wounded veterans and military families in the country. The project had grown far beyond our original expectations. Major defense companies were sponsoring tables. Retired generals were attending. Several senators had confirmed. The guest list had become absurd. The event would be held at one of the most prestigious venues in Washington. The kind of place where billionaires quietly discussed acquisitions over champagne. My assistant placed the binder on my desk. "We need final approval on the donor seating chart." I opened it. The pages were filled with names. Corporate sponsors, military foundations, political donors, board members. Everything looked routine, until I reached table 12. My eyes stopped moving. For a moment I thought I had read it wrong. Then I looked again. Emily Reynolds, Ryan Reynolds, Thomas Carter, Linda Carter, my parents, my sister, my ex-boyfriend, all sitting together. At my gala, I stared at the names for several long seconds. The room suddenly felt very quiet. "Lieutenant Colonel," my assistant's voice sounded distant. I looked up. "What?" She frowned. "Is there a problem?" I slowly leaned back in my chair. 100 different emotions tried pushing their way to the surface. Shock, disbelief, anger, bitterness, old wounds, old memories. But surprisingly, none of them lasted very long, because another emotion quickly replaced them: curiosity. After 3 years, fate had finally decided to bring us back into the same room, and they had absolutely no idea. "They purchased a premium donor table?" I asked. My assistant nodded. "The company Ryan works for sponsored part of the event." "Interesting. Very interesting." I lowered my gaze back to the page. "Ryan's company." I vaguely recognized the name. One of several firms currently competing for a massive technology contract involving military logistics systems. A contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Suddenly another piece clicked into place. The keynote corporate sponsor. The biggest donor. The most important guest. Daniel's company. I felt the corners of my mouth begin to lift, not from happiness, from inevitability. Because I knew exactly why Ryan was attending. Networking, career advancement, access. People like Ryan always chased the next ladder. And Daniel happened to be standing at the top of one. My assistant shifted nervously. Should I move them? I looked down at the names one final time, then closed the binder. No. Her eyebrows rose. No. I shook my head. Leave them exactly where they are. She nodded. Understood. After she left, I remained alone in the office for several minutes, looking out across the Washington skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly into the darkness. 3 years ago, I would have imagined this moment differently. Back then, I probably would have dreamed about revenge, humiliation, making them suffer, making them feel what I had felt. But age teaches you something important. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's indifference. Because nothing terrifies arrogant people more than realizing they no longer matter. A week later, Daniel and I boarded a private flight to Washington. Technically, the gala was already being called the event of the season. Every major publication wanted access. Every politician wanted a photo. Every executive wanted an invitation. The entire thing had taken on a life of its own. The moment we landed, the chaos began. Meetings, interviews, security briefings, sponsor dinners, final inspections. By the morning of the gala, the venue looked spectacular. The ballroom resembled something from another era. Crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, military honor displays, massive video walls showcasing veteran stories. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had envisioned it. I arrived shortly after noon to oversee final preparations. Staff members moved through the building with military precision. Security teams checked credentials. Event coordinators reviewed schedules. Caterers finalized service plans. Every detail mattered. And every detail reported directly to me. I spent most of the afternoon working, not thinking about my family, not thinking about Ryan, not thinking about Emily, until my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized it instantly. My older cousin Marcus, the unofficial messenger for family gossip. I stared at the screen. Then curiosity won. I opened the message. Sarah, heard you're helping organize tonight's event. Your parents are attending? Try not to make things awkward. I actually laughed, out loud. 3 years of silence. 3 years. And somehow I was still expected to protect their comfort. I typed a short reply. Don't worry. They'll have a memorable evening. Then I put the phone away. By 6 o'clock, the first guests began arriving. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Politicians, retired military leaders, corporate executives, television cameras. The entire city seemed determined to attend. I was standing in a private suite overlooking the ballroom when one of my staff members entered. They're here. I didn't need clarification. I already knew who she meant. I walked toward the window. Far below near the grand entrance, 4 familiar figures stepped onto the red carpet. My parents, Emily, Ryan. 3 years. And somehow they looked exactly the same. The same confidence, the same certainty, the same belief that they belonged in every important room. They smiled for photographs, shook hands, laughed with other guests, completely unaware they had just walked into my world. I watched Ryan adjusting his tie, scanning the room, searching, hunting, looking for someone. I knew exactly who. Daniel Brooks, the man whose approval could transform his career overnight. The man Ryan desperately wanted to impress. The man he had probably spent weeks researching. The man he hoped would remember his name. I couldn't help smiling. Because Ryan had no idea that Daniel Brooks would absolutely remember mine. By 7:30, the ballroom was alive. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. A string quartet played near the stage. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays loaded with champagne. Everything looked effortless. Only the people behind the scenes knew how much work it had taken to create that illusion. I stood inside a private executive lounge overlooking the ballroom. Below me, nearly 1,000 guests mingled beneath soaring ceilings and enormous American flags suspended beside military service banners. The atmosphere was exactly what I wanted. Elegant, patriotic, powerful. A celebration of service rather than status. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years earlier, my family had dismissed my military career as an obstacle to success. Tonight, that same career had placed me at the center of one of the most influential events in Washington. Life really did have a sense of humor. One of my staff members approached. The keynote guests have arrived. I nodded. Any issues? None? Good. I adjusted the cuff of my black evening jacket and headed downstairs. The outfit wasn't flashy. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. The tailored black uniform-inspired formal attire reflected exactly who I was. Simple, professional, confident. When I entered the ballroom, conversations continued uninterrupted. Most guests knew me. Some didn't. That was fine. I had never been interested in celebrity. I preferred influence. Influence lasted longer. I was halfway across the room when I saw them. My family, table 12. Exactly where I had left them on the seating chart. My father was speaking animatedly with a retired executive. My mother was scanning the room searching for important people to impress. Emily sat perfectly straight, her designer gown carefully arranged around her chair. Ryan looked nervous. Very nervous. His eyes never stopped moving. Every few seconds he checked the entrance. Then checked it again. Then again. Waiting. Watching. Hoping. I knew exactly what he was waiting for. Daniel. The man who currently occupied most of Ryan's professional dreams. The irony was delicious. I began walking toward them. Not because I wanted confrontation. Because eventually it was unavoidable. My mother noticed me first. The transformation on her face was almost fascinating. Confusion. Recognition. Disbelief. For a brief second she simply stared, as though her brain couldn't reconcile the woman approaching her with the daughter she remembered. Then came judgment. That arrived quickly. Some things never changed. She stood. Her smile was tight, artificial. Sarah. I stopped beside the table. Mom. The word felt strange after 3 years. My father looked up. His expression hardened immediately. Emily blinked several times. Ryan froze. Nobody spoke for a moment. The silence stretched. Finally, my mother recovered first. What are you doing here? I almost laughed. What was I doing here? At my own event. But I kept my expression neutral. I'm attending. Emily glanced around the ballroom, then back at me. Oh, her tone carried immediate dismissal. I thought maybe you were working. There it was. The first shot. Predictable. Almost disappointing. I smiled politely. In a way I am. My father frowned. What does that mean? It means I've been involved with the event. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Apparently that explanation fit neatly inside the version of reality he preferred. He nodded once. As long as you don't create unnecessary drama. I stared at him. 3 years. 3 years without speaking. And that was his first concern. Not my life. Not my health. Not whether I was happy. Drama. I suddenly realized something. He genuinely believed he had done nothing wrong. That realization somehow hurt more than the betrayal itself. Emily crossed her arms. I heard you were doing well in the army. Doing well. Interesting phrase. As though 12 years of military service were some casual hobby. I nodded. It's been good. She smiled. The same smile. The same one from the restaurant. That's nice. Ryan remained silent. His discomfort was obvious now. The longer he looked at me, the less confident he seemed. Good. Let him wonder. Let him think. Let him remember. My mother leaned closer. Listen carefully. Her voice dropped low. Tonight is important. I waited. Very important. Still waiting. She glanced around the room, then lowered her voice even further. Ryan's company is pursuing a major partnership. There it was. Everything always came back to status. To appearances. To opportunities. To climbing. She continued. Some extremely influential people are attending. I nodded. I know. You need to be careful. Careful. Don't embarrass the family. The sentence landed between us like a stone. Not because it surprised me. Because it didn't. 3 years later, nothing had changed. In her mind, I remained the unstable daughter. The unpredictable daughter. The problem. I looked directly into her eyes, for the first time all evening. Don't worry. My voice was calm. I have no interest in embarrassing anyone. Relief briefly flashed across her face. Then Emily laughed. A short, sharp sound. That's good. I turned toward her. She shrugged. It would be awkward if security had to remove someone. Ryan looked horrified. Apparently, even he thought that comment crossed a line. My father ignored it. Of course he did. He always had. Before anyone could respond, a familiar voice sounded behind me. Lieutenant Colonel Carter. The effect was immediate. Every member of my family turned. A distinguished older man approached. Retired General Michael Reeves, one of the most respected military leaders in the country. A man who had commanded tens of thousands of troops. A man whose books were studied at military academies. He extended his hand. I shook it. General, it's good to see you. You too, sir. He smiled warmly. I heard remarkable things about your latest assignment. Thank you. My father had gone completely silent. My mother looked confused. Emily looked confused. Ryan looked alarmed. The general continued speaking. I was hoping we'd have a chance to discuss your promotion. My mother's eyes widened. Promotion? Interesting. Apparently nobody had informed them. I decided not to help. The general smiled again. Colonel should suit you well. Now the silence became absolute. My father's face went pale. Emily blinked. Ryan stared. My mother looked genuinely shocked. Colonel? Not captain. Not major. Colonel. The rank carried weight. Influence. Authority. Even civilians understood that. I watched realization slowly spread across the table. Not complete understanding. Just enough to make them uncomfortable. General Reeves squeezed my shoulder. We'll talk later. Absolutely. After he walked away, nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Emily found her voice. Colonel, I nodded. Yes. Her expression tightened. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked away. Ryan stared directly at the floor. For the first time all evening, nobody had a clever remark. Nobody had advice. Nobody had criticism. Interesting. Then movement near the entrance caught everyone's attention. The atmosphere inside the ballroom changed instantly. Conversation slowed. Heads turned. People stood. Executives straightened their jackets. Politicians adjusted their ties. Ryan sat upright so quickly he nearly knocked over his water glass. A member of the event staff stepped onto the stage. She approached the microphone. The room gradually fell silent. Then she smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan's entire body tensed. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Daniel Brooks. The color disappeared from Ryan's face. Because the man he had spent months trying to impress had finally arrived. And he still had absolutely no idea who Daniel Brooks was coming to see. The moment Daniel Brooks entered the ballroom, the entire atmosphere shifted. Power has a presence. Not loud power. Not the kind that demands attention. The kind that receives it automatically. Conversation stopped. Executives stood. Politicians smiled a little wider. Corporate sponsors suddenly became very interested in appearing relaxed. Daniel walked through the entrance surrounded by a small security detail. Not because he enjoyed attention. Because people at his level rarely had a choice. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo. Simple. Elegant. Effortless. The kind of confidence money couldn't buy. The kind built through decades of success. I watched Ryan immediately straighten his posture. His expression transformed into the look I'd seen countless ambitious professionals wear around powerful people. Hope. Desperation. Calculation. Opportunity. The same look he had worn years ago when my parents convinced him that marrying Emily would help advance his future. Some people never really change. They just find new ladders to climb. At table 12, my family looked electrified. My mother adjusted her necklace. Emily smoothed her gown. My father sat taller. Ryan looked like he was preparing for the most important job interview of his life. Which in a way he was. The defense technology contract his company wanted was enormous. Everyone in the industry knew it. Winning it could transform careers. Losing it could destroy them. And Daniel's company happened to control a major piece of that process. Ryan knew exactly who Daniel Brooks was. What he didn't know was who Daniel Brooks belonged to. I remained standing near the center aisle. Calm. Patient. Watching. Daniel exchanged greetings with several senators. Shook hands with a retired admiral. Spent a moment speaking with a Medal of Honor recipient. Then his eyes found mine. And everything else disappeared. The smallest smile appeared on his face. Not a public smile. Not a corporate smile. The smile of a husband seeing his wife. The smile he reserved only for me. Then he started walking. Directly toward me. At first Ryan didn't notice. He was too busy rehearsing introductions in his head. I could practically see it happening. His company. His credentials. His ambitions. His future. He probably imagined Daniel would stop at table 12. Shake his hand. Exchange business cards. Open doors. Change his life. Instead, Daniel walked right past their table. Didn't slow down. Didn't glance over. Didn't acknowledge anyone sitting there. Ryan's smile froze. Confusion flashed across his face. Then Daniel reached me and wrapped an arm around my waist. The ballroom disappeared. Just for a second. The way it always did when he looked at me. Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. His voice was warm. Comfortable. Familiar. I smiled. You always say that. Because I'm always late. A few nearby guests laughed. The interaction lasted less than 10 seconds, but at table 12 it detonated like a bomb. I turned my head. My mother looked as though someone had physically struck her. Emily's mouth was hanging open. My father had gone completely pale. And Ryan looked like he couldn't breathe. The realization was happening in real time. The event, the introductions, the military leaders, the respect, the rank, the authority, the husband. All the disconnected pieces were finally forming a picture. A picture he desperately wished wasn't true. Daniel leaned closer. "You okay?" I glanced toward my family, then back at him. "I'm perfect." He followed my gaze. Immediately understood. I had told him everything. The restaurant, the betrayal, the engagement, the years of silence. Daniel looked toward table 12 for exactly 3 seconds, then returned his attention to me. Because unlike them, he wasn't interested in power games. He already had power. The master of ceremonies approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could please take our seats." Guests began moving toward their tables. The ballroom gradually settled. Daniel offered me his arm. I took it. Together we walked toward the front of the room, toward the head table, toward the stage, toward the seats reserved for the event's leadership team. Behind us, I could practically feel my family's eyes. The entire room watched as we sat together. Not hidden, not secret, not ambiguous, visible, public, undeniable. For the next 30 minutes, various speakers addressed the audience. Veterans shared stories. Military families spoke about sacrifice. Donors were recognized. Awards were presented. But I noticed Ryan wasn't listening. He kept staring, trying to understand, trying to rewrite reality into something less painful. Eventually, the moment arrived. The master of ceremonies returned to the stage. "Before we conclude tonight's program, there is one more person we need to recognize." The spotlight shifted. I immediately knew what was happening. Daniel smiled. The traitor. He had promised not to do this. The audience applauded politely. The host continued. This event began as a small idea. The giant screens behind the stage illuminated. Photos appeared. Veterans, military families, fundraising meetings, planning sessions, months of work, years of preparation. The host smiled. But one person refused to let it stay small. My stomach dropped. Daniel looked entirely too pleased with himself. The audience laughed. The host continued. One person spent nearly 3 years helping build this vision. A photograph appeared behind the stage. Me, standing beside wounded veterans during a fundraising event. Then another. Then another. Then another. The room erupted into applause. I closed my eyes briefly. Daniel squeezed my hand. The host smiled. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Carter. More applause. Louder this time. The host continued. Officer, leader, advocate, and the driving force behind everything you've seen tonight. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward me, including 4 very specific pairs. Then came the final blow. The host smiled toward Daniel. And we'd also like to recognize the woman Mr. Brooks constantly refers to as his greatest blessing. The audience laughed warmly. Daniel didn't even try denying it. The host raised her hand toward me. Please welcome Mrs. Sarah Brooks. The room exploded. People stood, applauded, cheered. Military officers, executives, politicians, veterans, everyone. I slowly rose to my feet. The standing ovation continued. Across the ballroom I found table 12. My father was staring at me, not with disappointment, not with judgment, not with superiority. Regret. Pure regret. My mother's eyes were filled with tears. Emily looked completely shattered. And Ryan looked like a man watching an alternate version of his life disappear forever. For years he had believed he chose the better future. Now he was forced to watch the future he abandoned standing beside the most respected man in the room. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. I felt closure. Because the truth was finally visible. Not just to them. To me. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed them to understand. Their opinions had stopped defining me years ago. The applause slowly faded. I sat down. Daniel kissed my hand. The evening continued. And for the first time since that restaurant 3 years earlier, I felt completely free. My parents attempted to approach me before the event ended. I was polite, respectful, but distant. Some bridges don't burn. They simply remain behind you. As Daniel and I left the ballroom that night, I looked back one final time. Not at my family, at the stage, at the veterans, at the life I had built. The life they once believed wasn't good enough. I used to think losing Ryan was the greatest heartbreak of my life. Now I understood the truth. Losing him had made room for everything better. If this story touched you, I hope you'll remember something important. The people who underestimate you are often revealing their own limitations, not yours. Never let someone else's opinion become the ceiling over your future. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, family, and second chances, subscribe and join us. We have many more journeys ahead, and I'd love for you to be part of them.